psychological community stuff. So we'll use, in today's classes, I like to give this little disclaimer because I think meditation needs to be pulled from the Dark Ages into the modern age to really save the world like it's going to. Because that perspective taking, that widening of the human heart is like the only thing that can help us. We could make more laws, or we could get more permissive, or we could do it. And if you don't have that basic level humanity, which something that does what meditation does gives you, then none of it really works. So we need to talk about it on the rational level. But then in today's class, for efficiency's sake, we're going to use the metaphors from India because they work, in describing that. Okay, so meditation posture and the inner winds. The other thing about these inner winds is that, like Maggie was saying, and like the acupuncturists will know, and Ayurveda people will know, is that they're considered to be like a bridge between the body and the mind, right? So in, like a little bit like we were talking about in the service this morning, there's the exteriors, which are kind of things you can point to and pat on like I'm doing right now. And then there are the interiors, which if I want to know about Edie's interiors, I can't, I could do a brain scan, or I could, check her hormone levels or things like that. But really, if I want to know what those are, I have to ask Edie, right, what's going on for the interiors. So they say the bridge between the stuff and the one who experiences the stuff are these subtle energies. What this means is that a trick to initiate deeper states of meditation, or calmer states of meditation, or more comfortable states of meditation, is that if you can learn how to regulate these subtle energies, the mind comes along for the ride, right? So if you've tried to meditate, you may have had this experience. If you sit down and your mind just goes off on its own direction and doesn't do what it's told. Have you ever had this experience, mind not doing what it's told, right? Or sometimes you're a great meditator and then you have an emotional thing happen in your life, and all of a sudden the mind only wants to do that. Or you had a long day or too much coffee or something, right? What these yogis propose, you may have also experienced this. Let's say, scenario I've experienced, I was having a pretty good run with meditation, then something emotional happened in my life, and all I could think about all day, including my meditation practice, was the thing, this job, this relationship, this person, this relative, this whatever, right? And then go to a yoga class. And at the end of the yoga class, for 5 minutes, the mind just shuts up and stops thinking about that thing that's just going over and over and over. Or you go and do a hard workout, right? Or, have you ever had this experience? You got really mad at somebody you were talking with, and then you did what you're supposed to do and go take a walk and take a few deep breaths. And were you able to get out of the swamp and into a place of empathy or clarity or something like that? It happens sometimes. It's not a guarantee that going for a walk is going to do it. What they would say in the ancient tradition, and okay, so I gave you guys Buddhist secrets this morning. I'll tell you another Buddhist secret. There's this secret vow. Really, there are these esoteric Buddhist societies, and they're actually pretty cool. They have this, what's the opposite of nefarious? Right? Secret societies are supposed to have nefarious plans, right? What's the opposite of that? I don't know. Anyway, they have this anti-nefarious plan to take over the world with kindness. Kindness will dominate all of humanity. All the creatures will live together in one new world order of harmony. Anyway, there's an actual vow in there that says, I vow to use both internal methods and external methods for my spiritual development, right? So if you're a traditional Buddhist, you should write that down because it'll come up in the future. I vow to use both internal methods and external methods for my spiritual development. So what does this mean? The internal methods are what we think of, what you think you get if you come to a meditation class, right? You sit down, you forget the body, and then you start to calm the mind. And we've done a number of meditation classes on what do we do with the mind? Oh, we can direct it on compassion, or we can fix it on one object, or watch the breath, or let it get calm and relaxed and soothe out any challenging feelings that are left stuck in our tissues or things like that. That's inner methods. Outer methods are like going for a walk when you're angry, right? Because you'll know if you've ever been angry, if you try, like, and I, as a person who counsels other people, as a religious person, spiritual person, as a clergy person, I hear, one of the things that I hear the most is like, I'm just so angry and I'm trying to stop being angry and I just can't. You know, and I say, well, of course. Like, you know, like that's you're not, nobody can stop being angry. That's not how it works, you know. But if you can change the energy or get to a higher level of integration or invoke compassion somehow or go for a walk, oftentimes you can shift that, right? So internal methods, this is this knowledge that I'm on a Buddhist track. This is not a Buddhist meditation class, but I'm on a Buddhist track. So in the progression of Buddhism, it happened in Vedic yogi systems as well. They mostly started with people who were like, okay, sit in a lotus pose, forget the body. Now transcend everything. And Buddhism kind of has this as well. They say nirvana, you know, just blow it out. You don't even exist anymore. Finally, suffering, done. And that's they actually are pretty effective. Like there are some peaceful monks who hold that philosophy. Nothing against that philosophy. Later Buddhist sects come along though, and they say, look, you're progressing nicely in your meditation where you just sit for 12 hours a day, but you could actually progress even faster if you took a walk in the morning and took a walk in the evening. You know? Or then they get very specific and they say, well, if you stretch these inner channels in the body and you get that wind a moving and a flowing, then it will calm the mind in this way or that way. And they get very scientific. And that's something I think that would be fun to see research done on in the West, is to see, like, okay, they say if you regulate this inner wind, it helps with these issues in the emotional body. What are the practices you're supposed to do? Let's have a bunch of people do those practices and see if it actually helps. And then we can go and find the mechanism. Like, that would be pretty neat. But the anecdotal evidence says it kind of works. So that's what we're going to be talking with today. Normally, if you were to go to a Zen training or something like that, day one is posture, right? You do posture. And that, in some Zen schools, that might be all they ever teach you, actually, is how to sit up straight. And it's, for Westerners like me, it's very annoying. So we're doing posture. We've been doing these meditation courses monthly since like September, I think. And some of you have come to most of them. So we're only getting to posture now because the way I think of posture is it's actually kind of a secret method. Like once you've got your mind kind of calming down or grooving on compassion or something like that, and you're like, okay, now could I make it even better? Yeah, straighten your spine 3% more. And you might start to notice that some inner wind, and that's what it feels like if you go on a meditation retreat or something, like day 3, you get very sensitive of your inner self, and you make these micro adjustments, and it feels like some wind like started going up and down instead of, side to side or something like that. So that's what we're playing with today. Cool? Thoughts on that, or inspirations, or anything that comes up just from that little intro?
Do you have room from here to have great posture?
Yeah. We'll play with it in chairs, because there's versions in chairs and on the floor and stuff like that. And that reminds me, on the break, I'll get some little postural aids. So we're going to try, on your handout, we have the first topic, which is called the 7-point posture of Vairochana. So please say, because it's good for your face to say these things, please say Vairochana. Roch is, if I'm remembering my Sanskrit and Indo-European root words correctly, is the same root as the Latin word lux, which means light. Same derivation. So we get Roch, lux, light. Roch, light. you know, so you can see the derivation if I make funny sounds with my face. So just the thing to know, Vairochana is this Buddhist deity, we saw those this morning, of all light. So in the mythology, I don't know why I'm sharing this, doesn't have to do with today's class, but they say Vairochana could be anybody. They could take on any appearance. So like the person next to you on the bus, probably Vairochana, probably this light being who showed up just to teach you by being stinky, you know, or they say, I think it might be just a cute trick. The Buddhist masters say, like, think of the most annoying person in your life. Probably Vairochana. Mm-hmm. And you're just supposed to start to twist your mind this way, right? Okay, so we're going to take the 7-point posture of Vairochana, and we're going to see how it goes. So, number one, though, is a problem if you live in the West, because number one is cross-legged position. Classically, this is the lotus position, or what in the yoga texts they call the diamond position. So if you can do a lotus position, they say, yogically, that's just the best. But I'll tell you, the yogis that I know, except for a few of them, say, even though they can get in the lotus position, they would prefer not to meditate in it because you start thinking about your legs after a while. Like, it's hard enough on the hips and the knees and the balance and stuff like that, that after a few minutes you are thinking about your legs. So, the legs cross position, there are a number of them, and we could do them, I don't know, we could maybe do a couple today if that's a question for anybody. In the yogic texts, there's a whole list of seated postures, because that's what yoga was originally for, was to sit in meditation and not have to think about your physical body hurting you on the knees. So they're like, here's this one, this one, this one, this one. Choose one that works for you. What's nice for us in the West is that if we're sitting in chairs, we can take this as just putting your legs in a position that you will not have to think about them. So for me right now, my hips are not higher than my knees. Can you see that? I can feel it. My knees are actually just a slight bit higher than my hips. And what that will do is it's going to throw my lower back to sit in the chair like this. Ideally, if this class works as a virus, then you'll be going home like watching your posture all day and realizing that all the chairs in our culture are meant to make you sleepy and a little bit lazy, right? They take this spinal column and they throw it into kicked back position, which means our head has to come into flexion to relate to anything. And this is the posture of somebody who's getting ready to go inward and downward. This is the posture of someone who's on alert. Like if you sneak up on a deer in the woods, right? When they're chewing their food, digesting, or sleeping, the body curls this way. When you step on a stick, the whole spine goes into extension, right? The tail comes up, the head comes up, the feet perch, right? So what they would say for meditation posture is you want halfway in between those. You don't want this, because you'll get a mind that thinks it's time to wake up and run away. And you don't want this, because you'll get a mind that thinks it's time to go to sleep. Make sense? So, in general, are there people who like to meditate or sit cross-legged on the floor, just in general? Sometimes? Yeah? All the time? Sometimes?
Well, other than my Qigong practice.
Yeah, so that's your preferred meditation position.
Yeah, cross-legged,
Yeah, nice. Okay. People who would prefer to sit in a chair? That's me, actually, yeah. Because for a lot of Westerners, and if you ever took this and wanted to teach meditation to your friend or to a class or something like that, one thing to know is a lot of Westerners are going to have a problem with their back or their knees if you make them sit on the floor. It's just kind of a given because they didn't grow up resting like this. I can't actually do it right now because I'm stiff from a long drive. Yeah, the Asian squat. I can't do the real Asian squat, which is feet together. I fall backwards because I'm a white guy. So there's actually studies done, like cadaver studies, the hip socket, because you've heard of neuroplasticity, right? Okay. Osteoplasticity. Okay. It's a thing. If you clench your jaw a lot, when they eventually cadaver you and research you, you'll have a little ridge of bone here. Because when you pull the periosteum away, the body fills in bone. If you tighten this Achilles muscle and cord up too much, you can cause yourself a bone spur on the other half because this fascia goes right under there, it pulls the periosteum away, and the body fills in calcium. Cool, your bones are fluid. So if you go like this all your life, you get a big hump because the body fills it in that way. And then for a lot of women, it's especially challenging because osteoporosis starts to weaken the front half. And the spine, actually, they change into this shape rather than this shape. Anyway, if you grow up sitting cross-legged on the floor and squatting, you have a different hip socket than people who grow up sitting in chairs with a little folding thing to do your schoolwork on. So if you take a bunch of people who grew up like that, not squatting, and you make them sit like Indian monks, it will harm their knees because their hips don't work right. It'll harm their back because, they're... Here, I'll show you a white guy meditation position, number 1. Okay. And actually, I'm growing out of being a white guy, so the real white guy position is like this. Right. This is horrible for meditation, okay? I suggest if you really like self-torture, if you still have those kind of religious upbringing, you should try to meditate like that for 20 minutes or something. So anyway, learning how to set people up in chairs is very valuable if you ever want to share meditation practices with Westerners. Because a lot of, maybe you don't think this, maybe you're better educated, but a lot of people think that you have to sit on the floor to meditate. Have you heard this at all? A little bit, right? And so what do is not meditate, right? The first barrier is so high that I will never sit and calm my mind because I can't do that Asian shit, pardon my language, but that's how the thinking goes. Like you have to wear a robe, light incense, sit on the floor, and they just won't do it. So if we were able to start here's my grand anti-nefarious schemes again, but if we were able to start a culture of chair-sitting meditators and everyone came to know it, like that one, there's no incense in here. I took my robes off, and we're sitting in chairs. Even Western people can do this. It's great because it's just a matter of putting the body at ease. So that cross-legged posture, for you guys who are training to be teachers, just remember the cross-legged posture was the posture of ease for Indians 2,000 years ago, right? That was the posture of ease. So what's the posture of ease for the culture that you're teaching? Yeah. In China, the Chinese Taoists, here's the meditation posture, and some of them sit on the floor, but a lot of them will sit in chairs, right? Or some of the Chinese Taoists, in the warriors' cultures, they even stand up to meditate. And this is the posture, because they're used to, playing with swords and stuff, they go like this and they learn to put the body in total repose while standing. So this is the principle. When it says legs crossed, we'll talk about one other principle later, but the first principle to know is find that posture of greatest ease and stability. Okay, so like I said, this one's wrong for me, and the chair height is wrong for me to go here, because still my knees are level or above my hips. You want the opposite, hips level or above the knees. So usually when I meditate in here, I'll sit on this and put my feet right over the edge. Now you won't be able to see online. That's okay. And then here, notice what my spine does. It naturally just perks right up. I can't, right? Don't we say when we're excited, I was on the edge of my seat, that whole movie. But here with my hips lower, I'm trying to perk up my spine and I'm being thrown backwards because I haven't looked at the mechanics of it, but I'm trying to do it. But if I pick up my hips this much, my spine just sits there upright. So we're going to want to find a seat that allows us to perk up the spine in that way. Cool? Makes sense? So, yeah. Yeah, I think I'm going to find my yoga props. I brought them
If you simply sit on the edge of your seat and move your feet forward, your knees will drop and your sacrum will tilt.
That's right. But you got to experiment with it. For me, that doesn't work as well as raising the butt. So that, and it also depends on that might work for this chair. There's a slope up here that won't work right now for me to experiment. But if the chair is low enough, it doesn't work no matter how far your feet go. So you want to find that height and that distance. A lot of time, straight down or a little bit out is good. And then here, again, we're trying to tune the mind. So if my legs are stretched out, the brain doesn't know what message my posture is sending it. So, like how far, and this is all personal. right? It's not going to be cookie cutter. So you have to find out, where do your feet go? Okay, so here's your task. While I go get some cushions out of the attic, which I forgot to bring down before class, play with your seat and see if where you are now or in some other spots in here, if you can find one that lets you have a naturally aloft spine.
Say what? Ooh, that's fun. There's like a secret.
Yep,
Secret
there's a
attic.
screen, a screen from the attic you can see down there.
Cool.
A little creepy up there when you're by yourself. Only one in the church.
Luckily, he's fucking.
If you need your butt to be hard, you can put a folded blanket under it. These are very helpful for butts.
Okay, so we have some toys that you can play with should you like. So for me, usually one of these firmly stacked is now I have become, I'm almost become, now I have become a meditator. Right?
Oh yeah.
So you can find out, I'll bring down one of these chairs from here too, and you can just play with it, what works. Now there are a couple cushions if you want to try the floor. You can try, like there's a squishy little one, a big fat one.
One for underneath? Give it a try. If you
It's
never,
pretty hot already.
Let's put this chair, they want to play. That works pretty good for you, Dave, huh? Yeah. Okay, what do you think? Comfortable, uncomfortable?
It'll take 20 minutes to know.
That's right. And see, so for you, that might be a bit stretched out.
Yeah,
I like to feel kind of,
I don't know whether it's too high or not.
Yeah.
I should-
because my tradition is a warrior tradition, we don't like to be kind of like, it's kind of like you want your feet right underneath you. And there's a certain degree to meditation where you want a perky mind like that creates. So, now one other thing that might be good for Westerners is that if you did want to sit in a chair like this, maybe that whole edge of the seat thing is not appropriate yet for the back. I encourage getting the back upright anyway, though, and to do that, you put a cushion behind the back. And now, there I am. So I'm not being tossed into the back of my seat. I'm being just propped right up. Yeah?
That's the way I do it at home.
Yeah. So there are all of these different things you can explore, and the idea is to bring the body to a state of repose so that you really don't have to think about it. Yeah, and then Rhiannon's suggesting the even more advanced method, which is you put one under your bum and one behind your back. So nice. So this all depends on what kind of a meditation do you want to do. So there's there's this practice they call remote viewing, which the Army actually developed for like secret psychic spy research program thing. And they developed, for this practice, they developed these easy chairs, like almost sensory deprivation easy chairs that they sit them in. And the idea was to bring the person to a state where they were almost asleep and yet still the mind was active. So for that, that would be a different principle, right? They're actually very reclined and supported. For the goals of meditation that we're talking about, there's something about actually holding your own body aloft that keeps the mind active in the way we want. We don't want the mind to go into a reverie so much. We want it to stay in this equal balanced place. Cool? Okay, so that's legs crossed. So let's stack it up. We're going to do a little practice in this posture. So find somewhere where you're comfortable. If you like where you landed, then stay there and try. If you want to switch around, that's just fine.
How about legs crossed this way? I've never done that.
That's all right. You can try it. Some physical therapists don't like what that does to your sacrum, to cross either way.
Maybe I feel that.
Yeah, so if it eases you, it's probably good. Okay, so then number 2 on your sheet says hands in the lap or on the knees. And again, the most basic part of this is that you put your arms in a position that you can forget about them. So the classical meditation position is called Dhyana Mudra, and they put one hand down, the other on top, and the thumbs lightly touch. This Dhyana Mudra means meditation gesture, right? And they're supposed to sit right here, but then one of the problems tends to be is like, I'm using shoulder and arm muscles to keep my arms here. Yeah, that's right. So this is a practice that if you were sitting in the lotus pose, it sits right on the sole of that upturned foot, and it's just perfect. But if you're sitting in any other pose than the lotus pose, it can get like awkward. So most people will put the hands here, just palm down on the knees. But there are, just because there are some meditators who like doing the traditional, one way to balance this is you put a prop there. And now my arms will stay like this the whole session, right, without any activity from myself. So there's always stuff to fiddle with that you can adapt to your own practice. So they say there's something calming to the mind about this little egg-shaped gesture. In Suzuki Roshi's book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, they talk about keeping this posture through your meditation. This can actually be a way to watch your mind. If your thumbs start to collapse, if your egg collapses, you lost your mindfulness. So you can bring this back up. And so you have okay mindfulness if your posture doesn't collapse, but you also don't have to be rigid to hold it. Yeah.
I'm also connecting the two sides of the brain.
That's right.
By connecting these.
Yeah.
So one would think that crossing the ankles would be a good idea.
Yeah. That's probably the original crisscross applesauce notion. Yeah. Okay. The back is straight. So just to feel it, try for a moment putting the spine in flexion. And just notice how that feels on your psyche or your energy body, if you relate to that terminology. And what they say is you should probably feel a little sleepy, right? Then try putting your spine into extension. And notice how that one feels. See if it feels different in your awareness. Okay, this one, they say, should make you either more wakeful or anxious or aggressive or something like that, perky. And then what you want is halfway between those two, right? So you're not too perky, you're not too sleepy, you are right in the middle.
We're taught that posture in ballroom dancing, by the way.
The perky?
Just in between.
Just in the middle, yeah. So very similar. Okay, so see if you can find that. And now this, yes, sir?
I find when I sit up straight that my mind starts to fade, my consciousness starts to fade.
That might be good,
Good?
right? Well, is it uncomfortable?
No, I mean,
Like sleepy
like
or
faint or something.
faint? Interesting.
Like blood pressure not flowing to the brain.
So there's always, it may be a physical thing. There
Yeah.
may be some blood pressure thing. I'm not sure what mechanism that could be, but so that's something always to check out. All of this is modifiable. So one practice you might want to try is doing the pillow for a straight spine. So rather than holding it up yourself, you'd prop it into
Like
straight.
your muscles are contracting around blood vessels.
That can happen, yeah. Because they say I'd have to look and validate whether the research is really true, but I read once in a book that like the erector spinae of a Zen master, the muscles that hold up your spine of a Zen master are more relaxed in a sitting Zen master than a lying down ordinary person. And, I'd have to check and see if it's true, but it made a lot of sense to me, at least on the feeling tone of that. So check it out. So this is we're already starting to meditate. If we've got the legs in repose, the arms in repose, and now the spine is upright. And the suggestion I'd like to give is as you sit, every once in a while check in with your spine and see if you're leaning forward or if you're leaning back or if you're right in the middle. And try to kind of, like you're tuning an instrument, tune your spine. If you're too wakeful, tuck the chin down a little bit. If you're not wakeful enough, lift the gaze a little bit and see if you can actually tune your mind by how your spine is lined up. Oh, it actually feels really good to me. Does anybody notice that you're already drop into a little bit of a relaxation state just doing the posture? Cool. You look very relaxed. Oh, so just chill, just relax. Get yourself a posture that's easy. But no pain equals gain. Okay, shoulders spread like a vulture's wings. So,
The elbows.
yeah, look up here. It's not like this. That's not what they mean. But think about your scapula on your back. Okay, Maggie, can I borrow you? Can you stand right here? So you're going to think about your two wings, your two scapulae, and without necessarily physically moving, think about them spreading laterally. Spreading laterally. Okay, so you're not trying to do something with your shoulders. You just think about them broadening. And there's something that, as they broaden, it lets this actually start to slide down.
I found that with these up here, this is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But
I
these
had to
narrow,
move over one seat because this one is higher than this one.
but this narrow, I can't.
Yeah, so then
It
you would,
doesn't
you'd find a better
Better
seat for
chair.
yourself. Yeah. Or you can change your orientation. Sometimes just putting the hands on the hand rests, like if you're stuck in a church and they're like, let's meditate, you just adapt to what you got. So that
The best there
that may
is.
not be your chair, find whatever you want to get comfortable. So the spine is just upright enough, and now you just feel those shoulders broaden, and that broadening allows them to settle. So they say like vulture's wings, but maybe we should think like angel's wings or something like that. Like think that you're like just expanding your angel wings in the back. Okay, the head and neck. In the notes it says chin slightly lowered, but what I'd like you to do rather than that is your gaze, if your eyes are open, would be looking straight ahead. And now the chin is just going to draw back toward the neck just slightly. So rather than looking forward like you're scrutinizing something, you draw back and you stack that crown right up on top. Now if you do that right and you feel a little pull from the crown, there's this subtle thing that happens is it'll actually pull the pelvic floor up a little bit. It might even slightly engage the core a little bit. So there's this very regal bearing. Very regal. Okay, in the mouth they say you should touch the tip of your tongue just behind the teeth. And your eyes, in this version they're saying are half open, and you look down to the tip of your nose and then into the space beyond it. But for you, you can do whatever's comfortable with your eyes. But try this downward glance. We're just going to sit here for a few moments, keeping all those postural points, and see if you can notice that you can use these points of posture to kind of tune the mind by tuning the body. like strings on a guitar or violin. Tune that spine, the position of your chin and jaw. If your mind wanders around, just try to bring it to the present moment experience, feeling your body, even noticing the sounds around you and the breath, just being very relaxed with whatever's happening. And then slowly deepen the breath. And then just let go of trying to meditate or holding yourself up. Find whatever relaxed posture you want to just chill out in. We'll come back and chat for a few more minutes. Yes?
When they say in this teaching, the tip of the tongue touching behind the teeth,
Mm-hmm.
do they mean that in the same way that we would do in our qigong practice?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my teeth do not want to be touching or closed in contact
Mhm.
while I'm doing that. Is that normal?
That's fine.
That's
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah. And different schools, so there's all of this stuff. Maggie brings up a great question. There are some Chinese schools of meditation that say different things than the Tibetan schools, which say different things than the schools of Thailand and stuff like that. And what that shows is that everybody's different. So there's one Tibetan school that says you should try to breathe equally through your mouth and nose at the same time. That does not work for me at all. But there are some meditators who can do it, and it like drops their mind into this heightened awareness. Right? You know, at least the effort involved in doing it will like make you a Bene Gesserit master or something like that. Yeah, so maybe that's the whole trick for it.
You don't want to be a mouth breather, do you?
Only if your allergies are too bad. Yeah, and then, but there's a reason for that, right? You know, like where does that expression come from? I think people who call on the phone. What are you wearing? Well, I got tinfoil curlers in my hair and my fluffy bunny slippers. Really? Yeah, I was about to put a lean cuisine in the microwave. Night. You know, but there is something they say that expression kind of points to this awareness that what we do with our body and our breath really affects the mind, or vice versa, right? So the mouth breather is this like aggressive, like animalistic. And if you breathe like that, my experience has been that it's harder to get the mind into a subtle state. Breathing through the mouth tends to put my mind into kind of a rougher state, either sleepy or very conceptual. Breathing through the nose, on the other hand, makes it much more smooth. So there's a lot of experimentation that you can do, and it's kind of fun. So anyway, with the mouth thing, some say teeth open, some say teeth lightly touching. For you, it's going to be whatever makes you comfortable, really. Not like this. You know, mouth is closed, lips are closed. But yeah, then the position of your teeth relative to that is just comfort. You know. What else do people notice? Did you notice that as you set the body up, the mind started to relax? Did anybody find that? Mm-hmm. So this is a cool thing, because we talked, maybe it was 2 months ago or something, we did a class and it was on ethics, right? The relationship between ethics and meditation. And so one of the points in that, because we always hear this like, and my friend well-trained Buddhist brought it up in a little debate we were having. And she said, like, Buddhists are always talking about non-duality, but then they're also always talking about morality, like that was a dichotomy or something like that. And it's like, well, no. What non-duality means to them is that everything you do is not separate from the quality of your mind, right? Of course, morality and meditation are intertwined. Like, where do the contents of your mind come from, if not your own actions, words, and thoughts, right? Like, you create them yourself. Was my answer that I never posted to that question. But if she's watching online, now that's my answer. What we said in that class was, in many schools, like in the Taoist schools of meditation, they use ethics as something that is easier to control than the mind, right? It's considered that your behavior, because you can see it and you can tell whether you did it, is easier to manage than, like, did I silence my thoughts for the hour? Or what we're going to get into in some of these future classes is this Buddhist master, Master Kamalashila, has the 9 stages of meditation, right? And my experience is it's kind of challenging to know whether you're at stage 3, 4, or 5, right? Because the ability to view the contents of your own mind, that's a deep skill. Like, you have to almost be at level 6 to know if you are at level 3, right? But you know whether you committed adultery today, right? Is everybody aware of whether or not you committed adultery? Right? Not hard to figure out. Now, in your thoughts, maybe, like Jesus said, well, if you did it in your thoughts, you did it just the same. Like, that's harder, but that's meditation, right? That's getting inside. So, similarly, or whether you were harsh with the person who tried to sell you life insurance or something. Were you needlessly rude to them? Did you say cuss words at them or not? You can decide. Most of us in most moments can decide whether or not to say a cuss word. There are some moments when you can't. Willow saw me in one. I was very tired driving, and a dude was trying to cut me off on the freeway, and I was trying to find where to turn, and I was on the wrong road, but there was no exit, and I shouted an expletive before I even thought. Like, I just really, if I could have controlled my behavior, I would have been a nice person in that moment. But in general, right, we can control our speech, we can control our body. This is harder to wrangle, right? So similar to that, ethics is an initial practice in these inner cultivation schools, and posture is an initial practice, because or your meditation teacher, sometimes, the myths say your teacher can see whether your mind is clear or not. I don't know if we validated that, but they can definitely see if you're sitting like this, right? And in the Zen school, they'll come and whack you with a stick if you are. And you get very perky very quickly after that hit with the stick. So, and what's cool is when you just noticed, when you put yourself in the right posture, it starts to hone the mind all on its own. So if there's one thing that you take from today's class, we'll practice a bit more, I'll babble a little bit more, but take this idea that if you don't know what else to do, and you want to be cultivating some beautiful quality of presence inside, tune the spine like the top of your banjo, right? Get it to just the right pitch, and the mind also starts to come into just the right pitch. Cool? Is that just rad to anybody but me? I think it's amazing. Okay, so then you have underneath saying, I thought it was from Suzuki Roshi, but I couldn't find it on the internet from him. But the saying is, proper posture is enlightenment. Proper posture is enlightenment. So in that school, they're highlighting this, what some of us just experienced, that you don't go like, okay, I'm going to set myself up, and then if I meditate really good, then blah, 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 blah. If you set your mind just right, you land in the present moment. Like any moment with that upright spine and an equilateral breath and the hands tucked in, like you're kind of a Buddha for that moment. Now, whether you can sustain it or help anybody with it, that's another question. But for that moment, like that's about as peaceful as it gets, really, if you really got it. So, just sit yourself up in the proper posture. So you can see part of this class, again, for some of you guys who are like Buddhist students and or thinkers in these fields, is there's this debate between like some of the Zen schools don't give you any meditation instruction, and they just say, no, sit. You know, and then you sit for 10 days straight. Something's supposed to happen or not. But for some of us in the West, like, we want to know, like, well, did I do it? Did I do Zen or not? And it's cute that there's this whole mysterious koan thing, but in the modern climate of spiritual practice, it actually creates the ability for a lot of spiritual bypassing and like weird stuff to happen, because the Roshi can just say anything and call it mysterious, transgressive, crazy wisdom, right? So we need a little bit of like rational, reproducible practices. So now we have, what's the logic behind when they say just sit up and don't think about anything else? Because if you did just sit up, that gives you the capacity to get in the present moment. And if you just, instead of going like, am I meditating? Oh, I'm breathing, and creating like this spiritual ego in there, if you just regulated your spine, the mind could actually start to calm down in that meditation session. You're not adding on all of this crud. You're just sitting. Cool?
So if I turn just right, I'll land in the valley of love and light.
And that's right. Because when true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend, we shan't be ashamed, you know, because that's one of our postures. Yeah. Go ahead.
I remember somebody asked the Zen master Dogen, why, if we're already enlightened, why do we have to meditate? Why do we have to go through all these practices? And he said there's no difference between practices and enlightenment.
Yeah, the practices are enlightenment. So this is very similar. You know, the Zen style has a very transgressive way of saying things to throw your mind into paradox, because what they would claim is that real spiritual insights can't be expressed in words. The minute you express it in words, you lost something, right? But you can dance around them, you know. And so in other schools than the Zen school, what they might say is, your nature is already enlightenment, but it's kind of like we're using it wrong, you know. Like one of my teachers recently used the metaphor of like that you've been driving around an airplane all your life thinking it's a car and wondering why parking is so hard and like, you know, why everybody's annoyed at you on the freeway. And the minute somebody tells you you're in an airplane and you start flying around, the whole problem is solved, right? If you just start using parking at airports and stuff like that. So similarly, the more we look around and we're trying to control the world and like close our hearts and stuff like that, we're going to suffer. But any moment of upright, dignified presence, like that, they would claim that's who you really are, you know, or maybe they would say that's your potential. So the minute you start living up to your potential, the problem is just disappears, just whoosh, gone, you know. So it's kind of cool. Okay, let us, because we've been here for an hour already, so let's take a short break, because that's important to move the inner winds as well. And then in about 5 minutes, we'll come back and we'll do the second half of today's class. Ding! Okay, no messages. This is good. How'd it feel? You were there for about 20 minutes. Feel okay?
I can do that.
Yeah. So just playing with it, you know.
Yeah, that chair's not the best, I don't think, for you.
This is not the best chair for me. At home, I have a chair that
That works for you.
works.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, June's voice is not the best for me. Yours is better. You relax quickly with your voice.
He talks kind of fast.
Or I guess he's engaging and you're relaxing.
Well, also, I think that's what I'm trying to do with Sue.
Yeah.
Not have her overstressed over what she's doing.
And we took a lesson from your, that we worked hard on left, right, foot, hand, and the awareness and not overthinking. Because overthinking, she gets her language wrong, she gets her body wrong, everything. If you just get her into not overthinking,
Yeah, it just took me a long time. I didn't get how damaged she was. I thought when I started that she was more together, to say it generally.
yeah, it wasn't stroke. She is not a stroke patient, even though she had 2 horrible strokes.
It was the other part that,
The other part where her brain was scarred for a long, long time, deeply scarred. Bacterially scarred. And so she's come a long way.
I really like that one, that's neat.
I love this song.
I thought that was Irish.
Probably is, originally. We do it from the Quakers,
Yeah, the
right?
Quakers,
The
I don't
lyrics,
know where
but
they got
who
it.
knows where the origin is.
Yeah, as I told you, when I was doing Soto Zen, I had a terrible problem with my back. And,
They made you sit on a zafu on the floor? No?
Well, it's on a pillow on a chair.
Uh-huh, yeah.
And they didn't say you couldn't lean against the back, but that didn't help.
Yeah, often the cushion against the back of the chair
Yeah,
is
could be.
the real
Yeah,
secret.
They didn't mention a thing about that. And that was a real obstacle to my medication.
That's right, yeah.
Because all I could think about was the pain in my back.
Exactly.
Why am I doing this
Exactly.
to myself? You know?
And so that's the point of the class. And what the thing you hear is there are some schools like in Vipassana, there's an assumption that you could get into a comfortable meditation posture, and then even then stuff will come up. And at that point you're supposed to be able to like sit through it and notice it and stuff like that. But we fail to make the distinction between an unhealthy posture versus a healthy posture with the inevitable pain that comes up. And so we're not supposed to just sit through back pain or knee, like if it comes up at the beginning,
You're not
like we're
supposed to
doing
ruin
something wrong.
yourself.
Yeah, but that's not often specified because these are these old black and white, us or them, all or nothing traditions of war.
But I belong to the Vipassana group, they don't do that.
No, but you'll hear it from some of the retreats or
mind,
some of the
yeah.
old Goenka retreats or things like that. And like if you had a good teacher and you asked them like, well, I'm really having pain, should I do? They'll tell you, oh yeah, do a chair or something like that. But often beginners come in and they get the sense that like, well, if you don't do this, you're doing it wrong and kind of thing like that. Half from what they're bringing probably. And it's nice to clarify that explicitly, so because you save a lot of pain and like get more meditation hours out of it.
Because I've done a lot lying almost flat on my back.
That's great. Why not?
But, and the teaching should be modified at least slightly for people of Dave's and my age.
Yeah.
Because after long years of having a back that's wrong, if you correct it, you may get less CSF flow.
That's right.
And you may faint or whatever.
Yep. And you can, it'll activate different little trigger points and stuff like that that can put you in pain for many days by attempting too quickly to sit up straight.
Yes.
So it's all modified. This is why in the old schools you always had a teacher, like a well-trained person who you sat with and asked your question. I mean, like I'm not a ancient Indian lama or something, guru or something like that, but like this size of a class is actually perfect with somebody like myself who's had yoga teacher training and a physical background, massage therapy, and meditation training. Because although, I can't lead you all to full enlightenment yet, we can actually get some of those specific things to, rather than say like, this is how meditation is done, we can say like, this is how Albert's meditation can improve 15% today or something. Here's how Edie's meditation, can, there's that bug. Well, I don't know about that, but does anybody else know? And like having that small community can really do a lot that like big cookie cutter version doesn't do.
I think I can get a lot more out of Edie's meditation by posture.
Cool. Teamwork. Give me 5. Yes. All right, should we get to it? Did we lose Willow? Well, at least it wasn't also the door. Whoa. See the world that you'd like to see. Okay, so we're back at it. So we have this great Zen saying, proper posture is enlightenment, right? And I think we all felt a little bit about what that might mean. Just another quick side note. I hope my personal excitement about the history of meditation doesn't bore people. I always wonder, like, whether it's like, do you even give a darn? But anyway, I'm going to tell you, and you can always tell me after class, because I know Maggie gives a darn. In Zen, one of the other, because there are all these controversies that it's just poor scholarship in the West. Like we've only been at this Eastern tradition thing since the 60s, and in the beginning it was only the people who spoke enough English or had a translator, and half the time the translators aren't Buddhist, you know, and so it doesn't translate. So in Zen they have all this thing of like, oh, you'll do this and you'll reach enlightenment, and what they're saying is not, like in the Buddhist study, they're not saying enlightenment. They're saying satori, which means the state of meditation that you have to be in to reach the first attainment, which then 5,000 lifetimes later will lead you to enlightenment. But there's this whole thing of like, so we don't know if they're saying when they say proper posture is enlightenment, they're probably saying proper posture is satori, which means don't worry about getting into a posture and then doing deep meditation. Do your posture as deep meditation, you know, like, so we have to meditate on it. Like there's no real answer because it's so ambiguous what they might have meant. So kind of fun. All right, you can look up if you want, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche talks a lot about posture in meditation. And just one of the things that really speaks to me, he's a controversial cat too, so don't be surprised if you never looked him up before. If you look up Trungpa Rinpoche, I'll get you in 1 second. But he also says some really cool things, which one of the things he says is he refers to meditation posture as a dignified posture. And so that was what I was feeling as I was doing my posture, and I glanced at Brady and his posture for a moment when we did the chin thing, like looked very dignified. And we'll get into this in a second of how the posture that you take externally actually does influence your mind. So there's something to, like what I was feeling as I was, you know, really going step by step through the posture and just kind of creating it is, as I felt almost regal, then my relation to the present moment was such that the feeling was anything could arise and I would meet it from my regal state of equanimity, right? It wasn't like puffed, like if I was in this posture, I'd probably feel anything that would rise and I could take it on. Or I'd be worried that like, what does it say about me or something like that. And if I was in this posture, I'd probably be thinking like, anything that would arise is probably out to get me, you know. But when you put it in that regal posture, like you feel like a king or queen a little bit, you know. So I like that poetry. So if it works for you, think about when you sit for meditation, placing yourself in a dignified posture. And there's just something, we all have to find our own poetry, but there's something to that. So maybe you still have to lean against the back of the chair, but can you be dignified in leaning back? And taking that tone influences these inner winds, which influence the mind. Okay, Willow.
I just couldn't catch the name of the Rinpoche you just mentioned.
Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. You're already studying him, right? Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism?
Oh.
Same dude. Yeah, so read Shambhala, The Way of the Warrior, something like that. The Way of Shambhala, or Shambhala, The Way of the Warrior, something like that. And by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And he's cool, even though he's wicked controversial. Not so much anymore, because he passed away a number of years ago, and so the controversies all tend to die down after a while. But you know, some of the guru stuff that always comes up with gurus came up with him. But one of the things that's cool about him is he was a highly trained Tibetan monk, and then he went to Oxford and became highly trained in the English language and serving English tea and tying a modified Windsor, you know, and so when he came to the U.S. and started teaching U.S. American students, he was teaching to Westerners. His whole thing was, I am going to teach the highest tantric Buddhism secret anti-nefarious plan to these people who know how to fix cars and wear combat boots and protest the war. So what do I need to tell them? So a lot of his terminology, it's poetry, which is this classical yogi thing. They don't teach from a book, they make up a song about it in the moment to try to teach you their wisdom. So he's cool.
Can you pronounce his name again?
Chogyam Trungpa. Yeah. Rinpoche. Okay. Any other from before the break or from just now? Yes, Willow.
There's a blank line on the piece of paper,
Oh, that's right.
sometimes called the eightfold posture. Number 8 refers to, but there's no number 8.
Yes, because number 8 refers to the breath.
Oh.
That you're supposed to fill in the blank. Number 8 refers to the breath. So if you follow the Tibetan schools, sometimes in the texts they'll say adopt the sevenfold posture, and sometimes they'll say adopt the eightfold posture. And sevenfold posture just assumes that you're going to breathe. The eightfold posture assumes they have to tell you to breathe, or you'd be too busy thinking about your vulture wings that you'd forget to breathe. So we'll do breath in a few minutes. Okay, so posture and meditation, the connection. There's an exclamation point. He must have been excited. Okay, so here's your practice. I think we did this in a sermon once, which is called Superwoman Pose. So we're going to adopt the Superwoman Pose. For this, you have to stand. And I'll see if I can do this for my friend Juliana and anybody else who tunes in later. Here, Maggie, do you want to be a loyal yogi? It's got to be sideways. No, you're turning the world upside down, Blair Witch. Okay, so here's Superwoman Pose. Your feet are squarely planted. Hands at your hips, puff out, and look upward. Smile a little bit, as if you rule this whole land, or, Wonder Woman, as if you protect this whole land. Okay, and we're going to stay here for about 30 seconds. Okay, if you do feel faint, then you can unadopt the pose, but just hang out for a minute. Maggie, you can do Ardha Superwomanasana. Ardha is Sanskrit for half. A few more seconds. Okay, and then gently relax. You can sit if you'd like to again. Thank you, Maggie. Okay, how did that feel, super women?
Delicious.
Fun? Good? Pretty. There's kind of an awesomeness to it. I didn't feel a massive change myself, but I might have been thinking about everybody else too much. But sometimes I'll do this, and you can get an instant shift in your consciousness. So, Superwoman Pose, there's a little link there. I'm sorry, you'll have to type that all in if you want. Or you can just go to TED.org and type in Amy Cuddy, which is the person's name is listed on that link there. And she's got it's like a 28-minute TED Talk on their research on how your posture affects your mind and the mind of others around you. Okay? And so this particular one has achieved a lot of attention because they've done tests on people, and they have them do a task before the posture, and then do the posture and do the task again, and then they ask them about their feelings of confidence and also assess them on their ability to do the task. And they notice adopting this posture compared to control changes both your confidence and your feelings of positivity and things, but also your ability to actually do these tasks that they put to you. Yeah.
I wonder if they did the same study where they had the people do the posture first and do the task for the first time? Because it seems like weird, like not super scientific to have them repeat a task.
Mm.
And
Yeah, I'm
You know,
sure
intentional.
she's a social scientist, so I'm sure
so
they've
they got it right.
figured it out. But you have a link there, so you don't have to have my stumbling explanation of
So
the
social
study.
scientists don't have to do the science.
See? I told you they were like that. They're not real scientists.
No, if I was doing it, I would do half the subjects would do it first and others would do it half, second, and
Yeah,
compare
I'm
the
sure there
data.
were numerous
Oh,
controls
yeah.
in there, you know, and numerous studies that they were drawing the same principles from. So,
I thought of the same thing when she said that.
yeah, so you'd have to look at their methodology. I didn't memorize that. But what I did memorize for my job as a meditation teacher is this works pretty good. And somebody proved it. So they also did, in there you'll see there's also some research of like having people watch the video, I believe, of the person doing a job interview, and they did a control group who didn't do the posture and then others who did the posture. But the reviewers of the video were blind, not physically, they were
Yeah.
blind reviewers as far as a double-blind study, right? And so they didn't know who had done the posture, and the ones who did the posture were like the ones they would hire, right? So they're exhibiting this confidence. And I guess they did this really mean thing, which also sort of demonstrates the value of posture, at least on the social level, is they had, the interviewers they had to talk to kept this expression the whole time. Which apparently is like extremely hard on the human nervous system. Like we're built to thrive on empathy and clear feedback. And so when a person goes stone face on you, it's like abuse. It's like a form of abuse in your brain. It's pretty terrible. You know, cortisol spikes and all this kind of stuff. So they tested these guys under this cortisol spiking situation, like, and having to give their job interview presentation. Cool. So watch the TED Talk if you're into that. If you're not into that, just realize that people are doing research on posture and how that affects your body, right? So the yogis say, oh yeah, you can't sleep, you're too anxious, do these forward bends, right? Oh, you can't wake up in the morning, you're too depressed, do these back bends, you know, in your yoga practice. And anecdotally, people, oh yeah, I tried that yoga thing, it worked pretty good. You know, and that's not research, but now we're coming along that there is research to back up exactly what these yogis are saying. So your body influences your mind, and of course the other way, but we already knew that. That's not news. But for the West, you know, in our Cartesian split, we're supposed to think that the mind tells the body what to do, and if you believe Nietzsche, if it doesn't do that, you kind of deserve to die, because you're not an Ubermensch, right? And then there you go. But in fact, it's a much more two-way street than that proposal. So I actually kind of like Nietzsche, but he's a little weird. So there's another little article for you from Psychology Today on there, and you can also look this up yourself. But she brings up the false dichotomy of exercise versus meditation, which one's better. Because you can read, you can do your own research on this, but there's a lot of good studies out on like the power of exercise to affect your brain. You know, like going for a walk in the middle of your workday brings on all of this great creativity and all of this great focusing and things like that. And then there's a lot of great research coming out on the power of meditation to affect your day, you know, or affect your brain. And so people are like, well, which one should I do? Well, yeah, Chinam Tapla Tsoarbet, I vow to use both inner and outer methods. Because then you get all this hippocampal whatever from the exercise and all this neocortical whatever from the meditation, and your reptile brain and your neo-mammalian brain are both optimized. That's pretty rad. So this is all, we're just getting to this thing. Part of this class is to train teachers for meditation, that when you get yoga people who come and like, but wait, what's the connection between yoga and meditation? Like, you'll have a series of studies that you can just cite that show, like, these guys, they knew what they were talking about. This is the optimization of the human condition. You could meditate, you could exercise, but the best is do a vigorous yoga practice and then sit down and quiet your mind. And like, cool. Yes, sir.
A few years ago, there was a lot of talk about holistic medicine and holistic lifestyle.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
what do we have for that?
It's still going.
Is it?
Yeah. I think they just are focusing on Syria right now.
They're focusing on what?
Syria and Turkey.
Oh, yeah.
But we'll get holistic again. You know, part of it was as Obamacare came online, we were starting to actually get more funding going to holistic medicine, because a lot of people are still just paying out of pocket plenty of money for the holistic methods that work for them, but which are not recognized by their insurance companies, you know, and so it'll probably be coming back around pretty soon. But that's also kind of based on this theory that there's a mind-body continuity, and you can, and then what was revolutionary in the late 80s when Dr. Weil came out and started writing his book, Andrew Weil, you know, he's cool. He's got a big old beard, and he used to take mushrooms and stuff. LSD. He wrote a whole book about the effects of various drugs on your body before he got into holistic medicine and stuff. It's a cool book, actually. I'm just thinking about the beard, it makes me smile. But back in the 80s, it was revolutionary just to say, there's this thing called the mind-body connection. And all, you know, all the meditators are like, oh, I knew it was true. Wow. You know, and now, 30 years later, the thing is life hacks, right? So the trick is, how do you use the mind-body connection? And people still, they don't quite get how to use exercise and meditation in conjunction to magnify each other. But it's sort of a cutting edge thing. Like, people are using, like, they're just trying out all kinds of stuff like mindfulness and weightlifting. And like, because they found that like lifting weights does all this cool stuff to your brain. Mindfulness does all this cool stuff to your brain. So the people who are like life hackers are like, well, I'm going to lift and meditate at the same time. Cool, you know? Maybe that'll be the big, you know, awesome new yoga. Maybe we'll have the same what they did 2,000 years ago in India, we're going to do in the gyms of the United States. Could happen. You know, like Rhiannon knows from volleyball training, those flow states, right? Like, but you're using physical engagement and intense presence and stress to slap you into the present moment, right? But then once you get it, it's ecstatic. You know, like the runner's high, or like, you know, the helper's high, or any of those that bring you to that present moment. Like, that's what everybody who does drugs in the world is actually looking for, right? And if we could hack our way to it, we've got something cool. And this meditation yogi stuff actually is time-tested, not yet completely materialistically tested, but time-tested ways to hack your way to engaging these flow states like all day long. So, cool. Okay, moving on. So those are just a few things for you. Then, why did I put this thing about habits in here? I don't know. I'll have to remember that. Maybe that was supposed to be in my sermon this morning. But so you've got a free quote from Aristotle that somehow is, I don't remember why it's in there. He says, what we are, what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. Somehow that related to the class, yeah.
Well, you know, at the last class, you asked us to try meditating 15 minutes a day, 3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for 2 weeks. And then I found that I really missed it. So I started doing it every day. So I'm doing it every night. And then 2 weeks ago, in Parade magazine, they had a little blurb about guided meditation with Headspace. So 10 days free, and then you had to join. So now I'm up to day 15 on Headspace, and I do that 10 minutes in the morning before I even leave my room.
So cool.
And I do that on a chair.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's become an addiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of apps too, a lot of free apps you can get
Yeah.
from the guided meditation, you download them.
Oh, well, this one I ended up paying $100 for a year. And it's unlimited
remember.
time and different sleep, and it's changed my sleep patterns. I mean, it's
So cool.
you know, and
Yeah.
I go to the gym almost every day as well. So I feel like the two things do go together.
You life hacked. You successfully hacked your own life.
Right.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was, you fell prey to my anti-nefarious plan, which is, if you decide to teach meditation to people, the 3 times a week, 15 minutes a day thing is so approachable that some people will actually do it, and then it feels so good that they won't stop.
Right. I couldn't.
It's really cool.
The end of the day came, and if I wasn't doing it, just something didn't seem right.
Yeah. And you're getting the same stuff that other addictions bring, but you're getting in a way that upgrades you rather than downgrades you.
It's a healthy
Right.
thing.
So it's like it's a healthy addiction, you know, because it's how we ought to feel anyway. and what we're looking for, coconut ice cream to fill up.
Well, I'm still looking for ice cream.
Well, meditation and ice cream. False dichotomy. Donna, false dichotomy. But maybe not for you, but for a lot of people, if I would have said, okay, you're going to do 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the night, 7 days a week, meditate, then again, they just never even try it, right? But if you can get that, you dabble the toes in, and it's like, hey, the water feels pretty good, and just jump on in there. So, yeah,
Well,
the
I've done
power
it
of
in the
habit.
past, but,
Yeah.
I lived in Sri Lanka and India because it was just part of the way of life. But,
Yeah.
But then I got out of the habit.
Yeah. So you've just proved Aristotle. Thank you. All right, let's do the 3 channels. So these are the 3 channels, and some of the folks have heard this before, but listen anyway. So in ancient yoga, this is now, I don't know if there are any correlates that we found modern, but we're going to just use the metaphors for these winds. They say, from your left nostril is a channel of energy that runs down next to your spine. And then some schools say it goes down to the genitalia, or some say it goes all the way down the leg. Most agree, though, that there's like a nexus in your center of gravity where these channels meet. Pretty much all the traditions, all the ancient traditions in the world, from the Americas to Japan to India to Tibet, they all say like something about this belly that's good for you to meditate on. Okay, so there's a left channel that runs down next to the spine. There's a right channel that runs down next to the spine. And then there's a central channel that's running roughly in front of the spine, they say in these old yogic manuals. Now, again, the question should be like, well, how is this ancient yogic lore practical for me? Let's do a short meditation. So please find your comfortable posture. If you want to try again those 7 points, this would be the perfect time to do it, because here we are, and I'm going to review them with you. So the legs are comfortable, crossed if you're sitting on the floor, or put at ease. And then finding how to bring your spine into that dignified posture. Not too puffed up, not too slumped forward, comfortable and dignified. The shoulders spread wide, and that allows them to settle down. The chin withdraws slightly so that the crown lifts up. Tongue touches the roof of the mouth. Palms are in a relaxed place, so you just don't have to think about your arms at all. Now just watch the breath go in and out for a few rounds while you sit in your dignified posture. You can become so relaxed that it's just enjoyable to do anything but watch the breath as it flows out, watch the breath as it flows in. And now please bring your awareness to the area they usually call the third eye, right in between your 2 eyebrows. But rather than thinking about like the front of your forehead, like on the skin, actually feel back about an inch between the brows, but about an inch back into the brain. And feel, they say in the old text, they say there's like a chakra, an energy center here. For us, what that means is just see if there's kind of a sweet spot where if you place your feeling there, your mind gets quiet or relaxed in some way. Sitting in our comfortable upright posture, and now just resting the mind on this third eye chakra between the brows and just feeling slightly back into the forehead. See if there's a spot that the mind naturally can rest in. our warm-up. So now, from this third eye, I want you to feel your awareness up to the crown of your head. And you may find a spot that just works for you right away. If you want some physical help with that, what you would do is you would use your fingers at the tip of your ears like you had Vulcan ears, and you just trace up where your fingers meet is this crown of the head point. You can actually touch or tap there to get the awareness to come to that spot. And again, we're just resting the sensation right on that spot in the body. And just notice what happens to your mind or your sensations as you do so. Now the final part of this prep is feeling into the pelvic floor. So keep a little awareness in the crown, but now you're going to feel into the pelvic floor. My meditation teacher always says between the plumbing. So this is your pubococcygeus muscle, your PC muscle, where they do the Kegel exercises. And see if you can find a spot right in the middle, in the bottom of the pelvis. This one they sometimes call your root chakra. Now between these 2 points, the crown of the head and the center of the bottom of the pelvis, please imagine a channel of light, like a lightsaber if you ever watched Star Wars. Or maybe like a river of light, they say in some of the ancient books. And it's suspended between the crown and the root, top of the head, the bottom of the pelvis. Imagine it with the color of like a gas flame blue. As you sit in your upright posture, just rest the mind on this visualization of this blue channel of light suspended right in the very center of the body. Mind wanders off anywhere, just bring it back. Feeling into and visualizing the central channel of light, blue flame color. You can also notice any other sensations or how your thoughts and emotions might be when they come up. Visualization go. And start to return to your ordinary interactive awareness. Take a few deep breaths. Let the eyes softly open when they're ready if they were closed. Stretch out just a little bit. And relax. Okay. Exciting, boring, tingly? What's going on up there on that head?
Tingly.
Yeah, cool. So there's something at least subjectively, there's something to these inner winds, because when you put your mind in different spots, they wake up and they buzz and they do weird things. Did anybody else get interesting sensations putting your mind on these different spots? Yeah. What do you got?
Oh, it made my head hurt worse.
Oh, bummer. Yeah, so then you go to the other one. Yeah, so sometimes, because in Chinese medicine they would say that where the intention goes, you're bringing energy. And that all sounds like woo-woo until you like have a headache and you realize if you put your mind up here, it gets worse, and if you put your mind in your feet, it gets better. It's cool, or if you can help your insomnia by taking a warm foot bath, because it's just like draws down. Maybe it's blood flow, something like that, but you can direct the blood flow with your mind too. So
On the other side of the spectrum, all day my knees and hands have hurt, except during the
interesting, yeah. So they would say you're changing the flow of energy.
or attention.
Yeah, and so we're using this energy metaphor, but however you want to say it, there's these cool, nifty little effects that happen. What else? Anything? Yeah.
Well, I also found a long time ago that if when I'm meditating, my eyes are cast down, that's work mode. Writing, computers, everything. Focus out there in the distance, the horizon, the cloud. That's
Yeah. So, and that's kind of like what Aristotle's saying is, if you have a conditioned habit to when your eyes go like this, that's work. Then that prescribed practice of eyes down won't be the one for you, because you've got a conditioned association.
there.
But so this is why my hope is in a class like this, we get to some of the whys rather than the whats. This is what you do to meditate. No, this is why you do that. Because what they're trying to do is when the eyes are open but looking down, you have a cross between sleepy awareness, which is the eyes usually look down and it makes the mind a little sleepy, but the eyes are open, keeping it wakeful. So everything in the posture is trying to balance this sleepiness and wakefulness so that the body goes almost to sleep and the conceptions go to sleep and the lucidity stays awake. Right? So, and then once you know that that's the principle, you can find out how to hack that yourself, right? It's not doing the form. What do they say? Try not to do what the masters did, but to realize what they realized. Right? And it makes it really effective, because then, you could, if somebody said this is how you have to meditate, you could spend years not getting to meditate, But if you know that's what works for you, then we're having a good time. Yeah. What else on that exercise? Anything else come alive for you? Yeah, Maggie.
When I'm mostly focusing on the upper centers or doing certain practices, I notice if I get too out there, I'm there's this great impulse to kind of go back.
Yeah,
like that,
wee.
Anyway, I don't know. And I have to resist and kind of realign.
Yeah, so it's good to ride that balance. In the classic yogic texts, they describe these sort of spontaneous physiologic happenings that will occur, and they actually recommend there are physical postures you can use to induce that. So, let's adult conversation coming. If you're not ready for that, just cover your ears. But when people have an orgasm, oftentimes. The really good ones, okay, not the run-of-the-mill, let's go have a smoke and some cheesecake, the really good ones, the eyes will roll up in the head, the breath sometimes will stop. I'm not going to model it for you. Watch When Harry Met Sally or whatever, yeah. You can see. But the eyes will roll up, the breath will stop, the body will go almost rigid or catatonic. And then this bliss will suffuse the cells, and the thoughts will all stop for a split second. And all you can think is, oh God, right? So the ancient tantric yogis, there were some rascally ones, but there were also some really divine ones in there. What they found is they said well, how could we have that all the time? Wouldn't that be fabulous? And it got perverted into this thing of saying have sex all the time. But that's saying Rumi meant actually get drunk all the time. It's no, he's talking about mystical practice. Come on, you guys. You can't write good poetry if you're drunk all the time, and to the amount that he recommends drinking. So, why are we saying this? Because in the Yoga Sutra, what they would do is, and it's so aligned with the principle of this class, is instead of waiting for that to spontaneously happen and create those postures in your body, they used the postures as a way of creating the internal sensations. And it works pretty good. So it's cool to know that those things happen. So like one of the things that happens is I'm still studying this, so my knowledge is not precise, but in this esoteric yogic lore of how you have an orgasm, like this, they were very interested in it because they said, this is a little outside of today's topic, but they said the process of having an orgasm, dying, and getting enlightened are very similar in the energetic body, right? So this is this sex enlightenment connection, and the yogis say that's why people are so obsessed with sex, is because they're actually going for this spiritual thing. I don't check that out. How are you going to test that? I'm not sure. So they said that in the process of an orgasm, some energy lights up this central channel, and it comes up to these upper centers, and they call it like melting substances of the upper chakras, which we would say would be like cascades of hormones maybe or something like that. But what you notice is that sometimes if you can get the energy, the winds to rise up here, it will induce those blissful states and the body sensations that come along with them. So it's not a bad thing at all that when you focus up here, you know, like the eyes roll up in the head and you're like, hopefully going into complete ecstasy. But what the yogis would do is, rather than go all the way over into allowing the spine to go into extension, they would keep the spine in that dignified posture and try to let the ecstatic state ripple up and down. And so normally what happens is it goes bliss, 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 done, right? So they would want to go bliss, 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 and just sustain that for as long as possible. So something to play with, you know, have fun. Dave, what do you think?
Is this similar to, I didn't hear what you were saying there, but I saw one. Is this similar to Kundalini and Sushumna?
That's right. So the thing we were visualizing in India is called the Sushumna, right, the central channel. And Kundalini is a tricky word because, again, we have a lot of different associations in the West, and there are different associations depending on the yogic schools. But what you could say, like Carl Jung said, is Kundalini is like the energetic expression of the evolutionary force in a human, something like that. And so maybe even just on a metaphoric level, visualizing energy moving upward through this channel is kind of giving our mind this clue to like raise up the energies in our body to a higher level. So something like that, yeah. But yeah, that's where all this philosophy comes from, is this Kundalini.
What term are you using?
Central channel.
I know nadis.
Yeah, nadis, the Sushumna Nadi is what it's
Is
called.
that the Indian term? Or?
That's Sanskrit, but Buddhists and Indians both use it, yeah. Buddhists and Vedic yogis.
Carl Jung said that?
Carl Jung wrote a whole book on psychology and Kundalini. And it's a pretty cool book, actually.
What's the title of that?
I think it's called Kundalini and Psychology, or something like that. Yeah. If you're into it. And it's a short one, so it won't put you to sleep. I used to use Jung when I got insomnia. Oops. I preferred to like have him distilled through Joseph Campbell, who is a much more interactive kind of guy. Okay, so just some fun things to think about. In the yogi system of old, they're also thinking that there are some real channel in there somewhere, right? That like this is not just a metaphor, that's in there somewhere. I'll leave it to your practice to figure out if that's true, or the future scientists of subtle electromagnetism or something. But what they say is that when there's too much energy flowing in the right side, you feel these things called anger, aggression, and aversion, right? Whether that's metaphoric or whether it's like really, like whether they're saying the right side, I don't know. It's even a debate in the yogic schools, you know, because like we were talking about this morning in the Buddhist school, they do say it's all empty, okay? Your mind is creating this phenomenon. So the idea is like, well, how are we going to use the phenomenon? My mind went to all this trouble creating it. Let's use it properly to create happiness. So they would say, you know, too much energy gets over here. You get feelings of aversion, and also this sense that reality is coming 100% from out there. they would say, in the yogi school, they say that sense is a, my mind wants to say disorder. It's also pretty much a disaster. A disorder of your subtle being. When you feel that reality is coming 100% out there, it's a disorder of your subtle being. Why? Well, what does that allow us? That allows us to have both Israelis and Palestinians say that the other guy is 100% responsible for all of the violence, right? I'm not saying who I believe, if anyone, but to say the other guy is 100% responsible can only create war, right? You can only perpetuate violence. And to perpetuate violence, you have to believe that it's coming all from out there, that you're not participating at all in the situation, right? So that's a problem. Then they say if too much energy in this left channel, this Ida Nadi, you get feelings of craving, painful, disturbing feelings of craving, and the sense that your inner self is somehow like a fixed, reified, real thing, right? That's not just being created in the moment, right? That won't just change in a few minutes. And have you noticed that our sense of self is actually quite malleable? It's we like to think we could fix it in one spot and say, there it is, that's me. But if you just think of the things that you thought were most important 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there are probably some consistencies and other things that have radically shifted. Here's just a bonus exercise. How did it go? My teacher taught, think of yourself a number of years ago, and your biggest. Can you remember a time when you had a personality flaw, something that you now would recognize? Excuse me. Yeah, but can you recognize 2 years ago, 15 years ago, something in your personality that from your perspective now you can think of oh, I'm so glad I grew out of that. Mm-hmm. Can you think of that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the meditation practice is imagine future you looking at you right now and seeing whatever it is currently that's the equivalent of that 15 years ago thing. Did that make sense in the way I just said that, right? And there's kind of this for me what happens is that 100% sense of this is myself gets a little wait a minute, if I can stand outside myself and look at myself, realizing that these old things that were so much me were actually just illusory disasters that could be changed, then maybe the me I think I am right now is also not very reliable. So they would say if you're stuck on this left side channel, you think the me is reliable, and you get all of these self-confidence issues or pridefulness issues either way, right? But what they say is that if you get the energies, the inner winds, into this central channel, you are not dwelling in afflicted craving, you're not dwelling in afflicted aversion, and you also see that the world you're perceiving is at least somewhat your own responsibility, and that the you think who's seeing it is also kind of a fictitious character. And isn't that just, I'd like to know your opinion, I know my opinion, doesn't that lighten things up a little bit? If you can step out and take perspective and see that it's all a bit fictitious, doesn't the heavy, horrible stress of it all ease just a bit?
I had a friend once who used to say, part of me wants this, and part of me wants that.
Yeah.
So if you'd ask me if you want to do something, say, well, part of me wants to do this, and part of me wants to do that. Is that better than having a monolithic self, or is that just another form of self?
I would say, in my own experience, that would signify what they call metacognitive awareness, right? You can step outside and see your own mind and see the different parts of your mind. And then from what I've studied, maybe the next level or something like that would be to identify with the part of your mind that transcends and includes both of those, right? So, because we can get into a place where we toggle, like the dude in Fiddler on the Roof,
No.
On the one hand, but on the other hand, tradition, like you run out of hands eventually. But if you can transcend and include those voices, you actually get a greater perspective on a lot of things. So something like that. So what they say, though, is that meditating on this visualization of the central channel, because the intention leads the energy, whether that's metaphorical or has a physical correlate, because we're visualizing this thing, what you should notice is that while you're visualizing it or throughout the day after you meditate on it, it's a little easier to remove yourself from the fictitious story of the solid world and the solid me, and kind of slip into the lightheartedness of it all. So this is just one example of this kind of energetic meditation, where they're actually using this sense of inner channels, inner energies, to tune the mind to a different state. What do you think about that? Cool? Groovy? Weird? Something?
I was just gonna say I like it, because then it's easier to
Yeah.
kind
And
of look at the self.
And it's one of those methods, again, where it can be very hard to tell your mind, okay, now today, don't be aggressive, don't believe the world is coming 100% from its own side. Okay? And like try to practice that for 15 minutes in the morning or something. And then I've tried that, and it works okay, right? But if this metaphorical practice, this inner symbolic practice, if there's something to it, and my experience shows me that there's something to it for me, you have to test it out for you, then there's something of, you realign the inner body, the symbolic body, that Carl Jung level kind of body, and it actually changes the way your thoughts are running more automatically. Rather than wrestling with the thoughts, you just go to a different level than the thoughts. You go to what's driving them and change that. So that's kind of the theory. Brady, did you have something a minute ago?
Earlier,
Ah.
I just realized that the Superman pose,
Uh-huh.
you cannot toggle it back and do the experiment the other way. There's only one way to do it.
Yeah. But you can do, the other one from the yogis would be, rather than like a collapsed pose, they would take like this forward bend, right? Often they'd put this bolster here, and they would just like completely repose their body. Sometimes they even put like sandbags on themselves. And so the opposite not being anti-confidence, but the opposite being deep relaxation, right? Because this is kind of a pose of activation, right? So, yeah, but yeah, I wouldn't do this experiment because it works. You'll get what your body tells you it feels. Maggie.
Yeah, I've been challenged a lot in my experience over the last few years of doing subtle energetic meditative practices because I have had those kind of precious, rare experiences of, quite a lot of powerful sensation in these centers. But it's always spontaneous, or it's always happening in certain conditions. And in terms of like a daily practice, the experiences that I'll have directly in my daily practice it just feels random,
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
So it's like, and so it triggers this upset, or it comes up sometimes where it's hard for my rational self to cope with that randomness.
Yeah.
When I'm committed to doing these certain practices, or I'm committed to like holding a staff in the ground around my belief in these principles and these practices.
But it'd be nice to have more confirmation. Is that like that
Yeah,
part of the
or
rational
or
self?
like not, or maybe put an emphasis on the karmic causes rather than, do whatever it would take to feel a kind of continuity,
Yeah. Yeah. Practically speaking, which I assume is what you want rather than just empathy. Or maybe that's a false dichotomy, but I only have time for one. Practically speaking, it's a very multifactorial thing, right? So, so like in Buddhism, we would say like, well, do you have the karma for it? psychologically speaking, we might say, like, what are the other lifestyle factors and inner, like, self-talk and habitual factors that influence how much you're able to meditate or relax during your meditation practice? Because if you're not relaxed and dropped in, you can't feel those subtle sensations, you know? And so, like what factors are there, you know? Or if you go from the Chinese medical viewpoint of like that, like there is an energy that's going to build up and do these things, like if you're not getting enough sleep or something like that, then you're spending that energy no matter if you do your meditation the way they said that you're supposed to do the meditation or something like that. So part of it is just looking at all of those factors. And that's troubling, because it would be nice if it was just like, do this practice, you'll get this thing, and whatever. You know, but in fact, it's like, do this practice, you'll get this thing, as long as you can do it for 108 days, you don't have significant emotional upset in the middle, you get, you know, 8 hours of sleep most nights, you know, and 6 hours of sleep one day a week if you need to, and then catch up the next day, you know, and you eat a bland diet. You know, yeah. I know. What the heck are they talking about? So, for example, I don't necessarily believe all of those, but like this is what they say in the textbooks, is you'll get this sensation if you do this, 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 and this. And to a certain degree, it's actually true if you can manage that. But collecting the lifestyle conditions to be able to manage that can be really hard. So what they would say as those meditation instructors, those people who take that as their job title, is that if that's where your practice is, then work on it there. Not meaning necessarily just stick with doing the thing that isn't satisfying for you and isn't giving you much, but take as your practice collecting those other factors, which are good to collect just on their own, right? Getting a good night's sleep, having the type of inner practice or outer circumstances that can prevent significant upset, you know, or consistent health for at least only getting sick quarterly, you know, which is those 108-day periods, you know. Like learning to collect those factors are preliminary to this other stuff, both traditionally and it's very pragmatic, I think. And then you don't have to think that that's a lesser form of meditation, right? The most powerful form of meditation is the one you need to do, right? So like in the Bhagavad Gita, right, there's this thing of Krishna tells Arjuna, like it would be, he says something like, it's a sin to do another man's dharma, to do another person's purpose in the world, but it's the highest virtue to do your own, you know. And I think we're thinking, oh yeah, you're supposed to be this kind of meditator and do this and this, and a lot of time that's somebody else's deal. And the minute we find our own deal and do it, half the time, all those sensations in meditation, like confirmation experiences in our meditation, that's actually when they show up, is when we relax and do our practice of the moment. And the longer we're doing somebody else's thing or something that doesn't match our life conditions, we're actually just pushing them away, even though we're doing it textbook correct. So that's some stuff to think about. In Dogen's work, they call it Genjo Koan, right? It's the koan, the Zen question that life is bringing you right now. And it's the most important koan practice to answer, is how do I spontaneously, non-conceptually, in full dignity answer the question that life is bringing me right now. No other question, you know, no, gotta look in my textbook to find out, like right now, based on what I know, based on my embodied wisdom, you know. And in my experience, the minute I get to embodied wisdom, all those sensations are already happening, but they're subtle. And so the more conceptuality or end gaining I have, the farther away they seem. And the more present moment relaxation I have, it's like, oh no, there's like heat moving here, and now my hands, now I feel like I'm floating in space, and like all this cool stuff, but it's not accessible from an end gaining vantage, which I know quite well. I've studied the end gaining vantage for many years. Okay, anyway, that's a long story. I hope that benefits you in some way. Dave, did you have something to add?
Well, I was just going to say, I fell asleep myself while I was in the maybe Marie had difficulty with sitting in with a erect spine because we're like pregnant women. We have too much weight in front, you know, that makes it a strain, is it upstrain because there's all that weight pulling it down.
Right, yeah, how the body is organized. There's also, muscle tonus. In bodywork, we look at the erector spinae muscles on the back and the rectus abdominis muscles on the front. They're like the rigging on the mast of a boat, right? And so if you tie one too tight, it goes this way or that way. So if you have tight back muscles, they naturally, they hunch the back in this position, but then we often tighten up our pecs so that we can hunch up here and still have a S-curve in our back or something like that. On the other hand, a lot of us have tight abdominal muscles, right, that pull us this way. And so if your meditation teacher has never been taught about trigger points in the abdominal muscles, which who in the heck knows that stuff, they'll say sit up straight, and you're thinking like, I can't. Like you're thinking this is, like my first Tai Chi teacher kept coming over and be like, relax your shoulders. I'm like, this is as far down as they go. Like, quit touching me, that they don't relax anymore. But the instructor was almost like, relax. I'm like, do you see any movement here? There's a physical barrier.
100 times I got that in ballroom dance.
Yeah. And over time we can do it, right? If you do, a little baby cobra pose or something that slowly stretches these abs.
I was going to ask you if you could recommend any. Actually, I tried yoga, for a while, not long, but
Yeah.
for a while I tried yoga. And it did seem to help a little bit.
Yeah.
The length of time before the pain became unbearable.
That's right.
Was reduced.
And so,
It was increased.
long-term practice of mild yoga is the best darn thing in the universe. And it's meditation and yoga in most of the ancient traditions, they always go together, right? There's always some form of yogic practice to go with your meditative practice. Even they say not in those South Indian Buddhists. If you look at the Thai temples, Thai massage, right? That was developed for monks to sit and meditate, right? So new monks, they would Thai massage those guys until they could stretch out and bend. And there's a whole series of statues of people doing these postures that are supposed to fix your physical problems so you can meditate. So if nothing else, we're out of time for today. I could chat with you for another 3 hours, but I'm also hungry. But if nothing else for today, what I hope is that we start playing with this concept that real meditation, I hate to say it that way, but advanced meditation or meditation for the 21st century is actually, it involves postural practices, physical body practices. It uses that mind-body connection and is actually really attempting to use it. It's very utilitarian on how do we set up the body and how do we use the mind-body interaction to bring us to states we may have never before had access to. So, what I would love to do, if you don't mind, as our closing activity, is if you could tell me one insight that you have had in this class today, then that will help me know that we're doing something worthy of your time. And I like that learning tool of just reviewing that. What was that one cool insight? Because I think it's a fun way to connect together. You ready?
Yeah. Well, for me, honestly, it's the legs thing. I was really caught up in having to sit, like you said, with a lotus position or something like that. It's like, how could I be comfortable like that? It's impossible to be thinking about that the whole time, trying to be comfortable. And so it's trying to be comfortable is the purpose of it, and the why of it is just.
Yeah. And if your yoga friends ever tell you, no, it's got to be lotus pose, you can tell them from the Yoga Sutra, Shtiram Sukhamasana. The definition of meditation posture is that which is stable and easy. Okay? 1st century of Common Era Yoga Sutra. An insight
That we can use a chair.
that you can, how nice, right? Yeah. Cool. What else? Anything strike you?
Because I was feeling so guilty that my hips and knees won't allow me to do the, on the floor the way I used to. But
That's so cool. And
now-
thanks for
now
sharing
I
that.
feel, like a weight's been lifted.
You can be dignified. And I love this part because for me it's like, I love hearing that guilt around meditation has been erased from the world in any quantity. Because what's more anti-meditation than like thinking you're doing it wrong? Right? So, cool. What else? Another insight? Something that you're taking with you today? Willow?
Well, something I'm taking with me is coming from more of the, if I was going to be teaching other people or leading other people, is just that I like the idea behind the 3 times.
The which?
The 3 times a week for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Because I do more than that anyway, so it's nice to know that that's like a little catch. And
Yep.
And then also how to explain to other people about being able to sit in other chairs with friends.
Cool.
Well, just my personal question about the, like, lordosis energy.
Oh my lord. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Other insights? You have to at least say pass if you know.
Mine was, like, my cervical spine is a bit jigsawed. I know there's a lot of shoulder tightness and neck pain and headaches and things that goes on. And I'm starting to unlock that again with the practitioner. I'm like, oh God, I wonder how much better and how much more blissful my meditation could be if, I mean, even with a jigsawed cervical spine,
Yeah.
I'm still getting these nice states. I'm like, oh God, I wonder what it would be like if my
Yeah,
spine
if
is
your
actually
was just
straight.
all stacked up.
So nice.
How cool.
Yeah, it'd be really kind of awesome. So I'm looking forward to that.
Nice. What else?
I think I've become lazy about intention
Aha.
and to listen from a new person's point of view. I haven't heard you as much, even though I got here. It just is a little shifted perspective, and I've become lazy in, doing things the same way all the time.
Yeah. Those new little things to look at.
I think mine might be obvious. The posture feels real good.
Yeah.
And I will practice that every day.
Cool.
I'm sorry, 3 times a week is not going to work.
Yeah, whatever.
And I'm
suits you.
also going to send off an email to my dance teacher and tell her that she should study meditation.
Or she's already kind of teaching it.
Right? If she is.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, and that's wonderful. I love, like we talked about, I think maybe the first one of these classes, that like meditation is supposed to feel good, right? And you could chat with Maggie all about this, like learning to induce these relaxed and pleasurable states to actually decrease trauma from your body. Like this is a great tool. And so when you say that, for me, it makes me very happy that like it's not supposed to be sit there and suffer and see how long. I don't know why I'm on dissing Nietzsche today, but like that would be like, and then you become an Ubermensch if you can overcome your suffering or something like that. This is like sit upright and you're dignified, but you know you're doing it right because it actually feels quite blissful. Okay, Dave, and then we can all go.
I was going to say, I'm really glad that you had the sermon prayer this morning at the same time that we had this particular class, because the two tied together for me pretty well.
Awesome. I felt that way myself too, so I'm glad it worked that way for you. All right. Well, I learned a lot, but I've been talking the whole time, so I'm not going to tell you any of it because I'm cooked now. But I am very grateful to see you all today, and I look forward to seeing you. I'll be back in this church personally on the 17th. I'm gone next week, but somebody nice will be here, and I won't see you though till the 17th. So please have a wonderful day, a wonderful life. See you next time.
Do you have any more notes? I was on
Dave,
the
you
main.
can have this
Oh, thanks.
Well, there you are.
What about, that's for today, I mean for previous classes. I have had other commitments, family stuff, other commitments with the college.
I can send them to you on email.
Email is fine, email is fine. What format are we in, Word or
Albert,
PDF?
would you hand me that vase?
Of course.
I can put them in
Word. Oh,
Nice
Word.
from your yard.
No Word. Like
Mostly.
Orchard Fausten, yeah.
Okay, I'll see what I can do.
I don't know if like, or Word